Now we are seeing European stock markets in the red, with the DAX leading declines currently down 0.9%, the Stock 600 down 0.8%, and the FTSE slipping 0.7% here in London. US futures are also turning slightly lower now. They were in the green earlier following a positive trading day in Asia, where we saw Japanese equities lead the gains, closing higher by 1.4% according to the Nikkei. The Hang Seng, however, now flat. We did see more modest gains in China as well. The big story today is really about oil after OPEC Plus agreed to extend record production cuts. Crude currently trading just below $40 a barrel at 39.9 for WTI. Brent trading at 42.8, up 1.2% this morning. That's fostered a bit of a rally in commodity currencies. The Aussie dollar and NOK leading G10 currencies. The NOK currently up 0.2% in Oslo. On the other hand, the dollar is headed for an 8th day of declines, currently down 0.1%. We are seeing the yen holding at 109.5, but do keep an eye on the yuan. The onshore sliding for a record 16th day, currently trading at 7.07. Similarly so for the offshore, down 0.1%. Sterling is bid at 126. The euro holding at 112 ahead of ECB President Christine Lagarde testifying before the European Parliament. 10-year treasuries are retaining last week's losses. The yield down 2 basis points at 91 basis points. 10-year bund yields holding at negative 28. 10-year gilt yields slightly weaker at 35 basis points. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Lynn Garrins with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. A further 12 people were arrested and 8 police officers injured at anti-racism demonstrations in central London yesterday. The majority were for public order offences and 1 for criminal damage. The police say a number of protesters launched attacks at officers and threw objects including glass bottles and fireworks. Anti-government protests also broke out in several Brazilian cities yesterday. That's as President Jair Bolsonaro suffers growing backlash against his handling of the coronavirus pandemic. Demonstrators carrying signs in defense of democracy and against racism gathered in cities despite social distancing warnings. They were encouraged by demonstrations in the US following the death of George Floyd. And China's simmering spat with Australia's deepening, with Beijing issuing a travel warning saying discrimination against Asian people is on the rise. The Ministry of Culture warns Chinese travellers to be on alert and not go to Australia. The warning follows Canberra's call for an investigation into the origins of the coronavirus. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, 2 drug makers behind the industry's most prominent responses to the COVID-19 pandemic are looking into the possibility of a combined future. British pharmaceutical group AstraZeneca is said to be interested in a merger with American rival Gilead. Bloomberg sources say informal contact has been made in what would be the biggest healthcare deal in history if it were to go ahead. For more, we're joined by Bloomberg's executive deals editor, Aaron Kirschfeld. Aaron, great to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining. Tell us a little bit more about this approach that Bloomberg has reported on. Is it a serious approach? Because we understand that a number of the executives from both companies have worked together in the past and know each other. So is this just informal conversations that might lead to nothing, or could it actually lead to a deal?
So that's a very good question. You're absolutely right. The CEOs of both companies have a connection through their past work at Roche. In terms of the approach, it was preliminary, according to people familiar. But if you step back and you think about it, doing a deal of this size before you would even, approach someone with a very informal proposal, even just an idea, you would have to put some thought into it, given the magnitude and the transformational nature. So I think it was kind of an approach at a high level to gauge interest, and now the big question is what happens next.
Well, indeed, and I mean, I suppose a lot of it's to do with the basic rationale. What is it in this deal of this size that actually makes sense?
It depends on who you ask, but the reality is, if you look back 2 decades at the big pharma giants, they've almost all of them have grown through mega deals. You might recall even just a few years ago, Pfizer tried and failed to buy Astra for $117 billion. So in this industry, it really is eat or be eaten. And so the rationale would be it's all about R&D pipeline and investments. It costs a lot of money to develop drugs and get them on the market. And while Astra has made a huge leap forward in the past several years under the CEO with their pipeline, Gilead has a good track record in terms of HIV treatment and other pipeline drugs. So if you were thinking beyond COVID and strengthening yourself, this might be a transformational deal that brings you to the front of the big guys and gives you a very strong pipeline and R&D budget.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess for AstraZeneca, it's about moving perhaps into antivirals, building on what's mainly been an oncology offering so far. And for Gilead, it's seen questions emerge over its growth prospects since the stock peaked in 2015. So while there may not be obvious synergies or much overlap, according to Sam Fazeli, a Bloomberg intelligence analyst, I guess there is some sense were this to happen. But what would be the challenges, Aaron? Because what's interesting is that drug makers were sort of under consolidation pressure even before COVID-19 happened. Now we're in this environment. Is it more challenging, or is the deal likely to accelerate?
I would think it would be more challenging. Deals in general, obviously, at the moment, with the lockdowns, the various lockdowns are difficult to do because you want to be in person. These aren't the kind of transactions you can do over a Zoom call, as it were. That said, this is not something that would happen overnight. As you mentioned earlier, the executives know each other. So I think, doing it now, yes, difficult. It would be a long-term project, but I think where there's a will, there's a way. And now it really comes down to the question, Gilead, they received the approach. They are now discussing it with their advisors. And, while they do see the rationale and our sources told us they'd like to stick to their plan of partnerships and small acquisitions, you always have to ask yourselves when you cover M&A, there's a price for everything. So what happens next is really the big question.
Aaron, thanks so much. Aaron Kirchfield there, Bloomberg's executive deals editor. And as we sit right now, the shares of AstraZeneca down 2.2%, Aaron.
Yeah, not too much of a surprise, because generally when you see news about M&A, the acquirers' shares tend to drop, whereas the company being acquired, the shares tend to rise. But we are looking at a third day of declines for AstraZeneca. We're also looking at declines for European equities in general, 25 minutes into the open. After a weekly gain, the Stoxx 600 down 0.8%. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Investors returned to work today after having the weekend to think long and hard about that Friday jobs report. Never were so many economists so wrong when the government reported a sharp gain in hiring last month and a lower unemployment rate. The market responded Friday with a powerful rally. How will the Federal Reserve see Friday's job report? Chief economist Laura Rahm at FS Investment says, we may find out Wednesday when the Fed wraps up its two-day meeting.
Did they say, we don't believe this jobs report, or it's too early to believe this jobs report? Or do they say, hey, mission accomplished?
More pandemic cuts in the air. Delta Airlines is suspending operations at 11 U.S. airports. The cuts will take effect July 8th, and the airports will still have similar flights from at least one other carrier each. And Apple is getting ready to offer installment plans for iPads, Macs, AirPods, and Apple TV if you purchase with the Apple credit card. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Radio.
COVID-19. On days when it seems there are nothing but questions.
What about the pandemic emergency purchase program in Europe?
What's the medical side of this?
We try to ask good ones.
How long until we have an answer on what drugs can help us fight this pandemic?
How do you think this has the potential to rattle markets?
Does that mean we should shut down?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com.
It's a rather controversial question being asked.
Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Who's in your corner? At Commonwealth Financial Network, our advisors would say we are. Our supportive environment lets you be true to yourself, and our culture of accountability means we don't just ask for your feedback. We act on it, so we can deliver the solutions you need to enrich the lives of your clients and build the business you've always dreamed of. Ready to discover the difference? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
It's not business as usual right now, but Square has tools to help your business adapt. Like Square Online Store. You can start selling online in a few easy steps with pickup, delivery, and shipping options. And if you are selling in person, you can take contactless payments with hardware like Square Reader and Square Terminal. You'll get your money the very next business day, so you can put it to work. All these Square tools work together, no matter where you're selling, and there's never hidden fees or long-term commitments. Find out how Square can help you get back to business by visiting square.com/UK. Square Up Europe Limited is regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority for the provision of payment services.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search Classic Game Replays to start listening.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Casting live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chehich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Roger, it's good to be back. What a week last week, one that none of us are likely to forget. And despite everything going on in the world, we saw equity markets hit high after high. But today we see a down day in European equities. The Stock 600 down 0.8% after a weekly gain for a third week for global equities. We see FTSE 100 down 0.5%, the CAC 40 lower by 0.8%. The DAX leads losses down 1%. IBEX and FTSE MIB edging into the red. And after showing some green on the screen overnight, US futures have given up their gains to trade flat. Dow, S&P and Nasdaq futures all treading water. The bond bears were out last week, though. We saw the 10-year Treasury yield jump 24 basis points. It had about the same range for 2 months, and it jumped that much in a week. Worst week for September for Treasuries and the steepest yield curve in more than 3 years. The 10-year Treasury yield does edge higher by 2 basis points now, approaching a 92 handle. We got to a 96 handle, of course, last week. The 10-year bund yield is steady, though, at negative 28. The 10-year gilt yield goes nowhere. Of course, it's the turn of the Fed this week after the ECB pulled out the stops last week, went above and beyond, perhaps not so much expected from Jerome Powell, which brings into question what happens with the dollar. It's seen 8 days of declines, heading for its longest losing streak since 2011, coming off its worst 2 weeks since 2012. In terms of what's outperformed today, we've seen some commodity currency outperformance, perhaps getting a bit of a lift from oil, but a lot of the gains have faded. That OPEC Plus deal that we'll discuss in just a moment might have been priced in by Friday. WTI up 1.2%, just above $40 a barrel. Brent crude at $42.91, up 1.4%, Roger.
Right, well, let's move on to some of today's top stories. Now, Boris Johnson starting a challenging week as he seeks to accelerate moves to restart the economy. But his polling numbers suggest support for the government soured, while he faces anger from the airline industry and within his own party over pushing through with new quarantine rules for travellers. Bloomberg Westminster's Sebastian Salek reports.
Public confidence in the Johnson administration has been damaged by the Cummings affair and by a confusion about whether the easing of the lockdown is led by the politics or the science. Weekend polls showed the gap between the Tories and Labour at 3 points, down from a lead of 26 in April. This week, the Prime Minister will brief the Cabinet on further easing and a raft of new spending to revive the economy. But he's heading for an angry clash with the airline industry and his own backbenchers over the new quarantine rules, which many say will be a drag on Britain's economic recovery. In London, I'm Sebastian Salek, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And British Airways is raising the stakes in talks over job cuts. The union says BA is threatening to fire all its pilots and hire them back on individual contracts. That's unless an agreement can be reached on new employment terms. The pilots' union, BALPA, says the move undermines the talks.
And also, we've onto the issue of big pharma is a massive thing today. We start with the biggest pharma deal ever. Sources telling us AstraZeneca's approached Gilead about a potential merger. The idea is a very early stage. There haven't been any formal talks or terms for the deal, and we're also told Gilead isn't currently interested in a big merger. A spokesman for AstraZeneca says the company doesn't comment on rumours or speculation, and right now AstraZeneca shares are down just over 2%.
And finally, OPEC and its allies have agreed to extend oil production curbs by a month, but scepticism that the cartel will be able to ensure full compliance is tempering price gains. Despite agreeing to the move, there's still doubt some in the group will stick to their pledges. Still, the deal is a victory for Saudi Arabia and Russia, who were deadlocked in a price war just 2 months ago.
Well, for more on all that, let's bring in Bloomberg's executive editor for energy and commodities, Will Kennedy. Will, good morning to you. It seems like a breakthrough, but I note a lot of caveats about even now whether everyone will actually stick to doing what they say they're going to do.
Morning, Roger. Yes, the focus of this meeting wasn't so much a decision to extend cuts, which I think most people expected and the market had broadly priced in, but the discussion about how to keep lagging members, those who aren't really following through on the commitments, in line. And what emerged from the meeting was an idea that those countries, which include places like Iraq and Nigeria, who aren't meeting their commitments in previous months, would carry that forward and cut even deeper in future months. And this is a pretty new and draconian measurement by OPEC standards. I mean, OPEC's always struggled with this problem of compliance, people not doing what they say they were going to do. And this would seem a change. The real question is, what happens if they don't follow through on that idea, and what measures Saudi Arabia and other leaders in the group have to really enforce this new idea on those countries, and I think that's an open question.
Yeah, and it's an interesting one, Will, given what a recovery we've seen in the oil price, the price doubling from when we saw that low back in April. So given what you've just said about the question ahead, how vulnerable is the price at this level if we were to see any signs that this deal isn't going to follow through as imagined?
I think that most people see a pretty stable oil market in the next weeks and months ahead. I mean, we spoke with a senior trader at Trafigura, the big commodities house, last week, and he said that he expects a much calmer summer in oil markets because these cuts, combined with the recovery in demand that we've seen in Asia and increasingly elsewhere in the world, have rebalanced the market. The days of when there was just a flood of oil coming into the market and filling up tanks seem to be behind us. That said, if oil prices get much higher, we risk some oil, especially in the shale patch that has been shut down, coming back in. So I think there's a consensus that we're broadly where we need to be. I think Saudi Arabia's concern is that everybody pulls their weight and makes sure, as you say, that the gains that they've made, I mean, the gains which I think very few people saw coming when we saw negative prices in April, those gains are sustained.
Yeah, it has been pretty remarkable. Let me pick up, though, Will, on one of the points you mentioned there about shale, because that clearly is going to be an important point as and when US shale producers come back on. What are the signs about that happening?
Look, I think there are two stories here. I think at one level, some of the wells which were shut because the oil that was coming out of them just wasn't getting any money, they are starting to come back online. And we've seen one big oil producer, Parsley in the Permian, say that it's going to reopen some wells it's closed. We've seen the shut-ins in North Dakota and other important shale region in the US come back. But that shouldn't be taken as the fact that all the oil is going to come back. Shale is a type of oil extraction that requires constant drilling of new wells to ensure that you can maintain production. Wells deplete at a very, very fast rate, and you need to get out there and drilling. And as yet, there's no sign of that drilling happening. So I think until we see that come back, and I don't think most people think that's very likely at these prices, I think we're going to see subdued production for the rest of the year.
Just very briefly, Will, Morgan Stanley have pointed to the downside risk, which you've already mentioned, shale, OPEC plus non-compliance. They also talk about a fall in Chinese imports. Is that likely?
I mean, I think imports are trying to run very, very, very strongly, and we're trying to understand that. There are probably two reasons to be a little bit cautious. One, throughout the world, we have to some extent replaced a glut in crude oil for a glut in products as refineries just turn crude into products. And that means refining margins are very weak. So we may see refiners throughout the world buy slightly less crude oil because it's just not that profitable to process it. Second of all, we don't know how much they're buying in. China has been driven by a desire to fill state reserves and instructions by the government for refineries to get back to normal. And it may be that the strong demand that we've seen from China levels off a little bit.
Will, thank you so much. Will Kennedy there, Bloomberg's Executive Editor for Energy and Commodities. Right, let's get the latest now in global news with Leanne Guerin, starting in the US.
Yes, Roger, good morning. New York City is lifting its curfew as protests remained mostly peaceful over the weekend. This comes as the city prepares for life after the coronavirus lockdown. And in a radical move, Minneapolis City Council has promised to begin the process of dismantling its police force. Minneapolis was where the protest began after the death of George Floyd. City Council members say they will consult the community on how to replace the police force. Here in Britain, Boris Johnson says anti-racism protests have been, quote, subverted by thuggery. The Prime Minister has tweeted after mostly peaceful demonstrations in London yesterday ended in scuffles. Meanwhile, in Bristol, police say they are working to identify who was behind the toppling of a statue of a famous 17th century slave trader. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has condemned the behaviour of those protesters.
Sheer vandalism and disorder completely is unacceptable, and it's right actually the police follow up on that.
New Zealand is ending social distancing after saying it has eliminated COVID-19. It paves the way to resuming normal life in one of the few countries that has successfully removed the pathogen. Strict border controls will remain in place to keep the virus out. Global coronavirus cases are now above 7 million, with over 400,000 deaths. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Tech by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Guerin. This is Bloomberg in Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Coming up on the show, we'll speak to Maximilian Kunkel, Chief Investment Officer for Germany and GFO at UBS Global Wealth Management, joining us live from Zurich after 3 weeks of gains for global equities. Stocks open lower in Europe. The Stock 600 down 0.4%, coming off the low slightly. This is Bloomberg.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hi, I'm Bill Hageman, Withum's proud managing partner and CEO. We recognize this disruptive time is unsettling. For the past 45 years, Withum has been committed to helping our clients, our people, and our communities to be in a position of strength with innovative business advisory, tax, and assurance solutions. If you need guidance on business interruption and continuity issues or remote workplace solutions, please visit our website at withum.com. Together, we can get through these challenging times.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago.
You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phones and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
People's Postcode Lottery's 30k a day is back. £30,000 will be won every single day by players in the July draws. That's £30,000 for every player in the winning postcode. Visit postcodelottery.co.uk/radio before midnight on the 18th of June to play in the July draws. PPL managed lotteries on behalf of good causes. 16 plus conditions apply. Play responsibly.
We're all having to get used to the new normal, and at Birkbeck University, we're experts at being adaptable. As London's evening university, we've been flexing around the lives of busy commuters for nearly 200 years. And you can find everything you need to secure your place for autumn online. From expert advice to virtual tours, a live chat with our students and course applications. Make the new normal, studying for the career that you really want. Search Birkbeck, and it's new problem solved.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Airbags to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
It's TuneIn Sports on this day. On this day in 1969, MLB legend Mickey Mantle gives his farewell retirement speech during Mickey Mantle Day at Yankee Stadium.
Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, Mayor Lindsay has proclaimed today, Sunday, June 8, 1969, Mickey Mantle Day in New York City.
To listen to conversations breaking down the moments just like this, search sports to be part of the discussion on TuneIn. Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
Plays to the 5! Touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
Okay, here we go.
With the NFL Draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL Show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying
to standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Use 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from London. I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Business Flash. Now, we are seeing most European stock markets in the red this morning. The Stock 600 down 0.5%. The DAX leading declines down 0.8%, with the FTSE slipping 0.3%. US futures fairly flat. It follows a bit of a mixed trading day in Asia, where we did see Japanese equities close higher. The Hang Seng currently flat, though, and Chinese equities having a bit of a more modest trading day, with CSI 300 up 0.5%. The big story today really is about oil after OPEC Plus agreed to extend record production cuts over the weekend. We are seeing WTI crude just below $40 a barrel, up 1%. We're seeing Brent trading at 42.8, up 1.3% at the moment. Now, that's fostering a bit of a rally in commodity currencies this morning. The Aussie dollar and the NOK leading G10 currencies, with the NOK currently up 0.5% in Oslo this morning. We are seeing, on the other hand, the dollar headed for an 8th day of decline, currently down 0.3%. The yen holding at 109.6 after first quarter GDP for Japan shrank less than estimated. We are seeing sterling bid up 0.2 at 1.269. The euro above 1.13 now, ahead of Christine Lagarde testifying before the European Parliament later today. Will be interesting to see what the ECB president has to say about last week's meeting. 10-year treasuries are retaining last week's losses. The yield up more than 2 basis points now, with the 10-year yield at 92 basis points. 10-year Bund yields currently at negative 28, and 10-year gilt yields at 36 basis points this morning. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrins with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. A further 12 people were arrested and 8 police officers injured at anti-racism demonstrations in central London yesterday. The majority were for public order offences and 1 was for criminal damage. The police say a number of protesters launched attacks at officers and threw objects, including glass bottles and fireworks. President Donald Trump is pulling around 9,500 troops out of Germany, and in another sign of disconnect between Washington and Berlin, Chancellor Angela Merkel was caught off guard. It cuts American forces in Germany by around a quarter. The president has criticized the Merkel government for not meeting its defense spending targets. And in one of the world's biggest diamond vaults, hidden inside an office on the dusty outskirts of Botswana's capital, Gaborone, the precious stones just keep on piling in. Owner De Beers, which mines and auctions most of its gems in the southern African nation, has barely sold any rough diamonds since February. Neither has Russian rival Alrosa. The coronavirus pandemic has devastated the diamond world, and jewelry stores around the world have shut. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garrins. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now, what are people doing who are still making marriage proposals right now? I'm guessing they still must be going ahead. I've certainly seen some on social media.
Which proposals on social media, but I don't think they're getting rough diamonds from Botswana in the engagement rings. Maybe they're ordering them online. I don't actually know. Roger?
Perhaps they're using different stones. I mean, it doesn't have to be a diamond, you know.
It does, because they're a girl's best friend.
Right, well, I'm glad we got to the bottom of that. Thanks, guys. Leanne Garrins with the world news. Now, let's get back to the markets as we kick off the week with a bit of red for European equities, at least. Maximilian Kunkel, Chief Investment Officer for Germany and Global Family Office at UBS Global Wealth Management, joins us now live from Zurich. Maximilian, great to have you with us on the show. Thank you so much for joining us. So it was a pretty good week for European assets last week. After the ECB did more than deliver, beat expectations, and of course there was optimism around stimulus from Germany and just the fact that Europe seems to be coming together both in terms of central bank and fiscal support for the economy. How much further does the rally in European assets have to run? And let's start with just European equities.
So we think that in the short term, because of the very depressed base, both in terms of investor positioning, but also relative valuations and sentiment broadly speaking towards European equities, it has further to run. And in fact, actually, what we are starting to see right now is a lot of incoming questions, in particular from many bears out of the UK, out of the United States and other regions, asking, okay, is Europe finally turning the corner? And what you indicated here is clearly that there are very good signs that at least it's making progress on many of the more structural issues that we know about. The longer-term story, however, is still one where we'd be very cautious in stating that Europe will reverse all of its underperformance versus the US in particular in equity land over the next few years.
Yeah, because, I mean, the data, it has to be said, out there fueling this is variable. I mean, Germany's April industrial output fell 17.9% month on month, beating the worst estimate. So, I mean, it has to be said, Max, I mean, there's a lot there that is potentially moving towards disappointment. That's a big risk going forward, isn't it?
Absolutely. So in the short term, we'd very much be in the camp of saying this outperformance has further to run. The longer term story, however, is clearly one where, if you look back, what has been driving the US outperformance versus Europe? It's been pretty much 100% relative earnings growth. And the question here is, does one expect really, already based on the composition of the indices as well as the underlying economic developments, the US all of a sudden to reverse this outperformance in the long run? And we would very much caution against that view. So short term, Europe has much going for it. Longer term, however, we would stick to the long-held view that the US is likely going to be in a better shape than Europe is.
Right, and does that view that you hold for equities, Maximilian, also translate into your view on euro-dollar? I mean, the dollar's had a pretty bad 2 weeks, and a lot of that has been down to the euro.
So there we do think, and that's, by the way, in part also a negative longer term for European equities, given its exposure to regions outside of the Eurozone in terms of revenues, that the US dollar is going to weaken further without necessarily becoming weak. Bear in mind that the US dollar is significantly overvalued against most other currencies in the G10 space. Against the euro, for example, we're talking about purchasing power parity of close to 130. There's very good reasons for that, of course. But we think that a mix of, on the one hand, a reduction in the growth in interest rate differential, as well as an increased focus on the double deficit in the United States current account, as well as fiscal deficit, will lead to a US dollar which should become less overvalued against most other currencies, and in particular also against the euro.
What are you expecting to hear from Jay Powell this week? What would you like to hear from the Fed? What would make things, what would raise your level of optimism?
An indication similar to what we had received already from some other policymakers, in fact, actually more policymakers on the fiscal side, when you're looking, for example, at Germany last week, that we are now moving away from having to cushion the downturn as much as possible towards trying to stimulate demand in order for the bounce back to be a broader one. That would very much be a positive signal to markets.
Yes, I mean, certainly not much is necessarily expected from Jerome Powell this week. Perhaps just some signals that the Fed will continue to support the market. What was interesting, as well as the fact that we continue to see risk on in global equities last week, Maximilian, was the move that we saw in the 10-year Treasury yield. We were in a something like 20 basis point range for April and May, and then suddenly in 1 week we jumped 24 basis points, worst week for Treasuries since September. Are you expecting any form of yield curve control from the Fed? Not this week, but perhaps before the end of the year?
Look, it could be an issue longer term, definitely, and in particular it will likely be a more obvious marginal tool than, say, negative rates in the US. But clearly in the short term we would not see that. In fact, we would think that yield curve steepening in the short term is likely going to continue, in large part because markets are now moving away from pricing out tail risks towards trying to price in a normalization of economic conditions.
And briefly, Maximilian, what about the UK economy in this in relation to what's going on, of course, with Brexit and the massive amounts of government borrowing that's going on? Do you sense that the UK economy can be pulled around in the right way at this stage with this administration?
Yes, yes, we do. And in fact, actually, when you're looking at the UK market, we are quite optimistic about the UK market. Trying to look at this from an investor's perspective, the UK economy, in our view, should not be worse off than any other economy, in large part because of the fiscal and monetary cooperation, which is among the best really coordinated in the world and most supportive also globally. When you're looking at valuations, you have the UK equity markets on a relative basis against the MSCI World trading close to a 20-year low. You have sterling close to a low on purchasing power parity, and that should bode well.
Interesting. Positive on the UK. Maximilian Kunkel, Chief Investment Officer for Germany and Global Family Office at UBS Global Wealth Management. Great to have you with us on the show. We're almost an hour into the equity trading day in Europe. The Stock 600 down almost 0.7%. This is Bloomberg.
A social distancing tip.
Putting distance, but picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Buckle up, race fans.
NASCAR is back in the driver's seat.
And you can cut straight to the action here.
With the Performance Racing Network on TuneIn, you can hear PRN's live coverage of some of this year's top events.
As NASCAR's top drivers, Kevin Harvick,
Clint Boyer, and more get back on the track.
Search Performance Racing Network to listen and see upcoming races. Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There are going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, rise to the 5, touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
The idea is to really hold the economy in suspended animation until we get control of this virus.
We are very much in a picture of monetary dominance.
We will get slower growth. I mean, let's not get confused about that.
We are in a national crisis. I think it is for all parties to pull together.
The euro area is facing an economic contraction of a magnitude and speed that are unprecedented in peacetime.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
A very good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepke.
And from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin, I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
So it's been quite a grim start to the week, Matt. We're down 0.7% on the Euro Stock 600. All that optimism that we'd built up over the past 3 weeks where European stocks did so well seems to be ebbing. I would just say, with the exception, it would seem, of the Spanish index, the IBEX 35, which is actually gaining 0.1%. And we're going to delve a little bit further into what's happening in Spain with one of our guests in this hour, Maria Martinez from McKinsey, talking about one of the European countries that's sort of unwinding the lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, and also I'm broadcasting from one that has done so. I went to a restaurant and a bar last night. And I've been eating at restaurants every night the last week, you know, compared to 2 months of cooking for myself or ordering takeout. So lockouts are starting to lift. The interesting thing, I think, is that the UK is still under such a harsh lockdown. Yeah. And I heard that they're now restarting or bringing in quarantines to fly to the UK if they aren't smart enough to just route the flight through Dublin.
Yeah, exactly. This, of course, faces challenge, though, now in the courts because the BA owner, Ryanair, EasyJet getting together to challenge the government's decision on that to bring in basically a 2-week quarantine for people arriving in the UK. Obviously, there's big worries about what that will mean for the summer season when the airlines and the tourism industry are desperate to get things restarted.
By the way, I'm looking also. I just wanted to look at the DAX index because, we're down today about 1%, 120 points. But last week, there were 4 days out of the 5 trading sessions that had gains with more than 400 points.
Wow.
On Tuesday, we were up 434. On Wednesday, we were up 466. On Friday, we were up 417. Wow. So the amount of gains that we've seen on these indexes, I mean, I'm just using the DAX because I'm here in Germany, but you can look across European equity indexes, certainly continental equity indexes, and see the rally has been strong over the past 2 weeks. We've added 2,000 points to the DAX, and now we're at 12,726. So a little bit of profit taking may be understandable.
Yeah, and you've got some analysts now saying actually it's time to look at European equities more closely, Barclays, for example. So some do see the rally continuing. So, look, we've mentioned the stock market indexes this morning, but let's also talk to you about the bond markets because also we have the ECB's Christine Lagarde appearing before European lawmakers today. So in terms of German yields, negative 28 basis points, that's where they trade right now. 92 basis points for the US benchmark yield, so up by 2 basis points. The other big story that we should mention in the oil markets, of course, is that Brent crude up above $42 a barrel, 42.89, so climbing 1.4% after the OPEC Plus agreement over the weekend that I'm sure we'll talk about in the show too. And WTI crude futures also at $40, pretty much on the nose, up by 1.2%. And just also in the FX markets, good to note that the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index continues to weaken, down 0.25%. The pound rallies 1/10 of 1%, 126.85, and the euro currently trading at 113.03, so also stronger, 1/10 of 1%. So that's a little summary of the markets for you, just as US futures, I should say, are still positive this morning, Matt.
Now, speaking of FX, let's bring in right now Peter Kinsella. He's the global head of FX strategy at Union Bancaire Privé. And Peter, just talking about the rally that we've seen in equity indexes the last few weeks, the last couple of months, makes me think about the rally that we were watching in the euro. It's back right now to, 113, and on Friday it was at 113.84. Do you think this common currency has continued strength ahead, and why?
Right, hi, Matt. Look, I think that the broad euro-dollar up move we've seen since sort of April or thereabouts, or even sort of early May, is mainly a reflection of dollar weakness. It's not really idiosyncratic euro appreciation to any large extent. So, it's one thing to expect the European currency to rally. I think it has, in part it has because one of the things that the ECB did was that they removed the tail risk of a sovereign debt crisis or an Italian debt crisis, basically with its extension of the PEPP program. And that's definitely led to a very large contraction in Italian spreads, and consequently you've seen markets sort of price out any sort of, extreme risk-averse event in Europe. So, Euro traded higher on that, probably in a small short covering move. That said, I think the ECB will not want to see an aggressive appreciation of the euro, particularly in a weak international environment. The last thing they need is a much higher euro. However, they may well actually just end up getting that, because certainly what we tend to find during the global economic recoveries is that the dollar tends to weaken, and it tends to weaken a lot. Right? We saw that in 2010. We saw that after the dot-com sort of crash in 2001. And I think the stars are aligning for a similar move this time. So I'm afraid that we're probably likely to see continued grind higher in euro dollar. Not an aggressive up move, but a grind higher is definitely doable in my opinion.
So then on the flip side, tell me more about the US dollar perspective, because obviously that is a bet on the fact that economic recovery may happen more quickly in the US. How did you look at the US jobs data on Friday? I mean, it was abysmal, but it was better than expected. So the dollar dropping this morning, an 8th session in a row, longest losing streak since 2011?
Yeah, it's impressive. I mean, look, I think on the jobs data, there are far better people than me who've analysed the data. But the fact of the matter is that, US jobs data, particularly in an aggressive recovery, they're very, very difficult to predict. The only thing we can get from or glean from the data is that we're seeing a two-speed recovery in the States, which is what we saw elsewhere in China. Basically, manufacturing sector is getting back to work, and the services sector is still but with a lag. So what that basically tells us is that growth is going to go in the right direction. We've likely seen the trough in terms of GDP contractions, both in the States and elsewhere. And from here, really, we can anticipate a reasonable recovery. You've seen the Fed doing everything they can. You're going to see a very, very large fiscal stimulus from the government. We are in an election year, of course, and they always spend money then. So I'm reasonably confident that we're going to get a pretty robust recovery. In fact, by December of this year, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw the U.S. unemployment rate well below 10%. So you will see an aggressive recovery both in this year and next. But what that means to the dollar is that it should tend to sell off, because certainly who needs to hold the dollar on a safe haven basis when the world is improving? And in that context, I can easily see the dollar dropping by between 3 and 5% on trade-weighted basis over the next year.
Okay.
All right, Peter, thanks so much for joining us. Peter Kinsella joining us on TV and on radio today. He is the global head of FX strategy at Union Bancaire Privé.
Yeah, look, I think it's well worth noting also that pound bears perhaps are returning. The worries about Brexit are also playing into the market. So the pound at 126.83. But that's for the FX story. Let's also talk about the other big news that may be coming. Of course, the two big drug makers, most prominent perhaps in the response to COVID-19 and the pandemic, are talking about possibly combining in the future. That's AstraZeneca and Gilead. Well, for more on this top story, we're joined by Bloomberg's executive deals editor, Aaron Kirchfield. Thank you so much for joining us, Aaron. What can you tell us then about this approach? How serious do you think it is at the moment?
So we think it was indeed a preliminary approach, probably at a very high level. But the fact is, this would be the biggest healthcare deal of all time. So I imagine even if you just float the idea, you will have put some thought into it, because it would be a transformative deal for Astra and Gilead.
I got to ask about, the word merger is thrown around. When I first started here at Bloomberg, that was when Daimler was buying Chrysler, and they called it a merger of equals. The PR people love that term, but it never really is the case. And even on our MA Go function, we break these things down into target and acquirer. So is this AstraZeneca going to Gilead and saying, we want to buy you?
I think you're absolutely right. It is hard to do a merger of equals. It probably doesn't exist. But all you need to do is look at the market caps. Astra is something like 140 billion. Gilead's at 96 billion. So just based on that, the UK firm would be the acquirer. That said, I think you would pitch it as a merger, especially if you were to explore something like an all-stock deal, to show this is friendly. We want to combine our different strengths. But you're right, it's somewhat of a communications exercise. So at the end of the day, I think the Astra shareholders would be the majority owner if this goes ahead. And if is a really big question because it's very early days.
Driving force for the deal, then, what would be in it? It's obviously not COVID-19. The companies are kind of trying to look beyond the pandemic, right?
That's absolutely right. I think you have to think longer term about what the strategic rationale would be. Big pharma deals are all about getting scale, about bolstering your firepower for R&D. I think one analyst put it at something like $9 billion plus would make them the number 2 in terms of R&D budget. So that would indeed be something appealing. And I think more than anything, if you look back historically, the biggest pharma players all were created through mergers. This would put the combined company well above $200 billion market cap, so it would get you really big scale. And yes, Astra has had a lot of progress under the CEO, Pascal, in terms of building up its R&D pipeline, and these strong shares reflect that. But Gilead has a history, even if they've had a bit of a rougher ride recently, of quite innovative treatments for HIV, hepatitis C, et cetera. So it would add maybe some promising drugs to the longer-term pipeline as well.
All right, Aaron, great to get you with us a little bit here on radio. I know you're very busy today. Aaron Kirschfield is the executive deals editor here at Bloomberg. Fantastic scoop by John Lauerman, Susie Ring, and the venerable Ed Hammond on the Bloomberg terminal over the weekend. Let's get over to Leanne Gerrans right now with your world and national news. Leanne?
Matt, good morning and thank you. New York City is lifting its curfew as protests remained mostly peaceful over the weekend. This comes as the city prepares for life after the coronavirus lockdown. And in a radical move, Minneapolis City Council has promised to begin the process of dismantling its police force. Minneapolis was where the protests began after the death of George Floyd. City Council members say they will consult the community on how to replace the police force. Now, here in Britain, Boris Johnson says anti-racism protests had been, quote, subverted by thuggery. The Prime Minister has tweeted after mostly peaceful demonstrations in London yesterday ended in scuffles. Meanwhile, in Bristol, police say they are working to identify who was behind the toppling of a statue of a famous 17th century slave trader. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has condemned the behaviour of those protesters.
Sheer vandalism and disorder completely is unacceptable, and it's right, actually, the police follow up on that.
New Zealand will remove social distancing requirements after reporting 0 active coronavirus cases. Bloomberg's Matthew Brockett says this indicates it's achieved its aim of eliminating the virus.
Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern said on Monday that all remaining restrictions on people and businesses, other than strict border controls to keep the virus out, will be lifted at midnight tonight. The South Pacific nation earlier reported that the last of its coronavirus patients has recovered, making it one of the few countries in the world to have successfully eradicated the pathogen, and the first among those that suffered a sizable outbreak. In Wellington, Matthew Brockett, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Take the Bond Challenge. Use the free Interactive Brokers Bond Scanner to search their deep availability of U.S. government securities, 38,000 global corporate bonds, and 850,000 municipals. IBKR passes through the highest of all bids and lowest of all offers received at the electronic venues it accesses. We do not widen spreads, apply hidden fees, or mark up quotes. How many basis points does your current broker keep? Find out at ibkr.com/bonds.
When you went car shopping, you meant business. You aced vehicle history searches and test drives. You out-salesmaned the salesman. Now you've got your wheels. If you manage that, you can get your retirement plan on track. Visiting aceyourretirement.org can help. With 401k tips and smart saving strategies, you'll have the info you need to get more for your future. Go to aceyourretirement.org, because when it comes to speeding past financial challenges, you're an ace. Brought to you by AARP and the Ad Council.
influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Tom McKenzie on Bloomberg Markets.
Hong Kong's government is promoting a message of stability, in particular for its currency peg, unbroken since the 1980s, as the territory charts a course to revive its flagging economy. Bloomberg spoke to Hong Kong's Financial Secretary Paul Chan about when he sees a recovery.
This year, I think towards the second half of the year, particularly in the fourth quarter, this is hopeful. But this is very much depend not just on ourselves, but number one, the coronavirus situation globally. Because if globally this is under control, then a lot of economic activities can be revived. And secondly, the relationship between the U.S. and China, particularly on the trade front, that would affect our foreign trade. And also thirdly, at the moment, when we get the coronavirus situation under control and the society back to a stable environment, we are going to encourage our own consumption. Say, for example, the $10,000 scheme for every eligible Hong Kong citizen.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York City. I'm Anne-Marie Harder with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. We are seeing European equities to the downside this morning. FTSE, DAX, and CAC all with red arrows. Europe's benchmark index, the Stock 600, down 0.6%, led lower by technology and consumer shares this morning. Comes as U.S. equity futures are also fluctuating. We are in the green at the moment, but we have seen some fluctuation throughout the session overnight. It's been a hot few weeks, of course, for equities. Investors now maybe taking some stock. What's the next big catalyst? Everyone this week will be focused on the Fed policy meeting, and that brings me to the bond market this morning. U.S. 10-year yield up 1.7 basis points, spot 9.1%. Lots to talk about the steepening of the yield curve and the questions regarding yield curve control. Is that the next tool of the Fed? The dollar, the index this morning, the Bloomberg Dollar Index down 0.3%, weakening, heading towards the longest losing streak since 2011. Euro dollar 1.13, and cable this morning 1.26. We are seeing the pound and the euro trade higher against the U.S. dollar. Oil this morning, Brent crude, $42.79. At one point, we were touching through 43. Historic output cuts were extended over the weekend. This morning, keep a lookout. Russia and Saudi oil ministers will be holding a joint press conference later this morning. And I just want to quickly end with iron ore on the Singapore contract. Trading above $102. There are supply shocks relating to COVID in Brazil. Many are saying we could see iron ore go even higher. That's a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrett with more of what's going on around the world. Good morning, Leanne.
Good morning, Anne-Marie, and thank you. The UK is finalising plans to ease its lockdown. That's as public support for Prime Minister Boris Johnson's response to the outbreak is dropping. 3 polls this weekend showed the gap narrowing between the Conservatives and Labour. Tomorrow, the Prime Minister plans to brief cabinet ministers on the next stage of easing restrictions. President Donald Trump is pulling around 9,500 troops out of Germany, and in another sign of disconnect between Washington and Berlin, Chancellor Angela Merkel was caught off guard. It cuts American forces in Germany by around a quarter. The president has criticized the Merkel government for not meeting its defense spending targets. And China's simmering spat with Australia is deepening, with Beijing issuing a travel warning, saying discrimination against Asian people is on the rise. The Ministry of Culture warns Chinese travellers to be on alert and not go into Australia. The warning follows Canberra's call for an investigation into the origins of the coronavirus and Beijing's decision to put tariffs on some imported Australian goods. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
All right, it is 9:20. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion right now. We are joined by Bloomberg Opinion columnist Julian Lee, who's writing about oil following this weekend's OPEC Plus deal to cut production even further. So, Julian, what exactly was this agreement? What are the details?
Well, I think really there are two important parts to it. The first is that the group has agreed to extend by 1 month the current level of output cuts. So back in April, they agreed that they would cut a combined 9.7 million barrels a day from agreed baselines. That was in place for May and June, and after that, the volume of cuts would taper, easing back to a 7.7 million cut from the same baseline. What they have agreed to do is to extend that full 9.7 for an additional month. There was some pushback against that early last week, particularly from Russia, but they were brought on side with what was a Saudi proposal. The Saudis had initially perhaps wanted an even longer extension. They compromised on a month. The second thing that they got that I think was equally important was an acceptance by those countries that had failed to make the full amount of their agreed cuts in May, that they would compensate with deeper cuts in the third quarter to make up for the volume that they hadn't removed from the market previously. And that's a real change for OPEC, this concept of making up for past failure.
Yeah, that certainly is a very significant step change. But then also the kind of fluid dynamics of the alliances within OPEC Plus. Back in March, Russia refused to go along with Saudi's plans for deeper cuts. Now they've agreed. In April, it was all about Mexico. What has been different this time, do you think?
I think what has been different is firstly that the Saudis managed to get Russia on side, so that the two countries were presenting a united front to the rest of the group. That may have been helped by the fact that really for the first time since the OPEC Plus grouping came together back in 2016, Russia had really made almost full compliance with its agreed output cuts. It was in OPEC sort of terms, it was one of the good guys this time around, where in the past it has been one of those countries that has failed to do what it would say. And I think that really helped in the dynamic of these two big heavyweights then putting pressure on everybody else, and perhaps going as far as threatening that if such announcements weren't forthcoming, that the whole deal could fall apart again.
What do you think about a recovery in demand?
It's very patchy. We were blogging the OPEC meeting on Saturday, so there's a transcript of the live blog of that meeting, and I put up some posts then that showed just how patchy the recovery is. I mean, we're seeing that commercial air traffic is still at roughly about 30% of what it was in January, so that's really not picking up very much yet. In terms of road traffic, yes, we've seen a big rebound in China, people going back to work, preferring their cars over public transport, but that rebound is very much restricted to the commuting hours. It's not yet spilled over into leisure driving, and it hasn't really happened anywhere much outside of China. Even in other parts of Asia, we're still seeing driving well down.
A significant issue, of course, for the oil markets. Thank you so much to Julian Lee, our Bloomberg columnist there. You can catch more on OPIN Go on your terminal. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Charlie Pellet. Professional basketball is on track to restart its season at Walt Disney World in Orlando, testing whether American sports can return smoothly from a months-long blackout. The NBA's Board of Governors approved a plan to resume the season at the theme park complex, where 22 out of the 30 teams will begin games on July 31st. Pro teams interrupted by the coronavirus pandemic have been looking at how they can safely play again, and the NBA is seen seen as a bellwether for much of the sports world. Penn State is starting to bring some students back to campus, including 75 football players. Voluntary workouts for football players who have been medically cleared can begin on June 15th. And Mavericks owner Mark Cuban says he will not be running for president, but it was something he was thinking of doing. Cuban told the X-Files podcast he did polling and was only able to get up to 25% of the vote, so he dropped the idea. That's the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Charlie Pellett.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
The market is unpredictable. BAM gives you certainty. In the face of volatility and illiquidity, BAM-insured municipal bonds deliver default protection, value preservation, and a durable AA rating from S&P. BAM's insurance protects against everything that causes a default, including natural disasters, financial fraud, pension issues, and economic disruption, like the one we're experiencing right now. BAM. Build America Mutual. Ask your broker about BAM-insured municipal bonds.
Why do You know that feeling when you get more than you expected? Like discovering that the box of chocolates has a whole other layer underneath? Or scoring extra poppadoms with your takeaway? Or joining Tesco Mobile and finding out you get the latest phone and 99% UK network coverage? Yeah, that moment feels good, right? Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
99% 4G population coverage indoors and outdoors across UK.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
At Wix, we put customer safety at the heart of everything we do. But right now, that doesn't just mean goggles, steel toe caps, and yellow helmets. It means 2-meter distances, paying by card, and safety screens at checkouts. So whether you want to shop with us in-store, click and collect, or have your order delivered to your home, let's do it right safely. Wix.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs. Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying
to stand out stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the Bloomberg Bureau in Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
And here in London, I'm Caroline Hepke. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
We are seeing some losses across European equity indexes to start the week, although they are being paired in size. So, for example, the FTSE was off almost 1% earlier. It's now unchanged. The IBEX and the FTSE MIB in Madrid and Milan, respectively, were down at the beginning of the session, and they're both now up about 0.5%. So there are still red arrows, but they're not as big and plentiful as they previously were. In terms of futures, if you're prepping for the U.S. Open this morning, we see gains. Okay, so big that I had to type my command in the Bloomberg terminal again. I had it wrong the first time. I was looking at the live trade from Friday. Friday was an amazing day of gains, right? 2-3% plus gains across European and U.S. Indexes, but we're seeing the gains here in futures that are much smaller. Dow futures are up 0.3%. S&P 500 futures are up 0.2%, and NASDAQ 100 futures have just turned slightly negative, really unchanged. But basically, we had such an incredible rally. It was almost buy on the rumor, sell on the news when you got those jaw-dropping non-farm payrolls numbers on Friday that now we see a little bit of a sell-off. In terms of other risk indicators, we see investors willing to sell U.S. Treasuries. That pushes the yield up to 91 basis points. We're looking at a euro that's up over $1.13 right now, a pound at 126.88, and gold trading for $16.95.54 a troy ounce. We were talking about oil, by the way, a little bit ago. $42.95 is what you pay for a barrel of Brent crude right now.
Yeah, certainly gone up in the last few weeks. Right, let's also talk about the IBEX and the Spanish economy, one of the countries that is starting to reopen after a 3-month lockdown. But the Prime Minister in Spain, Pedro Sanchez, is facing increasing pressure about his initial reaction to the outbreak. Spain suffered amongst the highest death tolls in Europe from coronavirus, and questions are being asked about the resilience now of the Spanish economy. So I'm pleased to say for this deep dive into Spain, we're joined by Maria Martinez, who is the senior partner for McKinsey in Madrid. She is also the leader of McKinsey's financial institutions practice for Spain and Portugal. A warm welcome to the programme. Thank you for joining us, Maria. Look, the concern about Spain seems to be that hard-hit sectors will just take much longer to recover, that the resilience is not quite there in Spain. What is your reading of it?
I think, again, this crisis came to a surprise to us in many countries, and I think the country is putting a lot of focus to it. It is true, and in the report we just published, the Spain economy maybe did some of the homework in terms of private indebtedness, but I think we still have some structural weaknesses that could make this crisis a bit more complicated for us. One is the dependency on some very hard-hit sectors, like you say, tourism, for example. Another one is we're also, the industrial structure is based in very small or more small companies than the rest of Europe. And I think this is also another part of the economy that will suffer more. So I think we need to just probably work more to get out of this. I think the focus is there, and I think private and public institutions are working hard to recover, reopen, and welcome to the past growth.
What do you think that we're going to see in terms of reducing the COVID-19 issue in Spain? Because it was so bad, right? I mean, you had people in nursing homes just dying at unbelievable levels. Has everything been taken care of? Is it all under control now?
I think time will only tell. My impression, and this is my personal reading of it, is that I think many countries have suffered similar situations, right? And I think time will only tell, and analysis will only come afterwards of what has been the true horrible magnitude of this, right? I think, again, measures have been taken, and the hospital and the healthcare system in Spain is not a bad one, but I think we were just overwhelmed, right? And And I think many things were put in place in record times, and effort from everybody in the society was seen. But again, it's been a learning, and I think only time will tell what has been the true magnitude of this.
Yeah, and there are deep divisions in Spain's kind of political landscape, as there are in many countries, very deep divisions. But having said that, what do you make of Spanish companies? They also have perhaps a problematically high level of debt, and defaults are a significant worry, aren't they, in Spain?
Look, the good news to me is that if you look at what happened, we started this report, we started just saying, are we better or worse prepared than for the last crisis, which was very bad in Spain, as you can remember, right? Yeah. And the good news is that both private indebtedness, so household indebtedness and companies' indebtedness went down to levels very similar to European averages. That was not the case in the past, and I think we suffered more because of that, right? Again, it is true that because of the composition of the sectorial fabric in Spain, we are probably exposed to harder hit sectors and more exposed than other European countries, namely tourism. But I think, and that is something that we will have to face, right? But our initial estimate is that the preparedness of the companies today is better than that we had in the 2007 crisis.
Okay, yeah,
Well, I was just going to ask about the tourism. When do you think it's going to come back? Is this summer over is this summer not going to happen for tourism in Spain?
Again, as any hard-hit countries like Italy or even France in tourism, I think everybody's putting a lot of effort on the national tourism revamping. Of course, this in Spain will not solve it because while the average in the world is to have about 30% of international tourism, Spain needs 55% or has 55% of international tourism in the sector, right? It is true that 85% of that is mostly European. So I think for us, It's very important to see what happens at the European level, and if we are able to bring back the confidence and the trust in the region, right? And also to me, again, another point of hope is that, again, this is not hitting us only Spain, and it's for Europe to make sure that these dynamics gain traction again. For the whole economy to go forward, right? And that's another piece that I think makes it very different than the last crisis.
Maria, thank you so much for joining us this morning, giving us a picture of what is going on in Spain. Maria Martinez, Senior Partner for McKinsey, live in Madrid for us. Let's go straight to Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans, who's got the latest in global news. Good morning.
Caroline, good morning. New York City is lifting its curfew as protests remained mostly peaceful over the weekend. This comes as the city prepares for life after the coronavirus lockdown. And in a radical move, Minneapolis City Council has promised to begin the process of dismantling its police force. City Council members say they will consult the community on how to replace the police force. Protests also continued across the UK this weekend. The Health Secretary says it's undoubtedly a risk that the number of coronavirus cases in the country will rise following the large gatherings.
The virus itself doesn't discriminate, and gathering in large groups is temporarily against the rules precisely because it increases the risk of the spread of this virus.
Matt Hancock's calling on those involved to make their argument in a way that is safe and controls the virus. Now, New Zealand is ending social distancing after eliminating COVID-19. It paves the way to resuming normal life in one of the few countries to have successfully removed the pathogen. Strict border controls will remain in place to keep the virus out. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says there are no active cases in the country. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Are you looking for senior care for your mom or dad but don't know where to start? Hi, I'm Joan London with A Place for Mom. Nobody knows your parent or loved one better than you, and nobody knows senior living better than the experts at A Place for Mom. It's a free service, and we've helped thousands of families find the right place for their mom or dad. There's a place for answers, A Place for Mom. Call today.
Call A Place for Mom at 1-800-391-1755. That's 1-800-391-1755.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. The university helped biomedical engineering professor Tara Alvarez launch a startup that may revolutionize vision therapy.
Our startup through NJIT is called Ocular Motor Technology. We create virtual reality vision therapy in a head-mounted display. So it's gaming, and basically we're sugarcoating the therapy so that children and young adolescents don't even realize they're doing therapy. To accomplish this, we need biomedical engineers, which are here on NJIT campus, computer scientists, artists, people that are into story development, and then we're collaborating with a lot of the large pediatric medical centers. This idea of a startup culture is extremely important to not just NJIT and the National Science Foundation, but also to the U.S. as a societal whole.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
If you can build that flat-pack wardrobe without looking at the instructions, you've still got it. If you can manage 5 keepy uppies on your first go, you've without question still got it. If you can toss a pancake to the ceiling and not let it hit the floor, surely you've still got it. And if you can just about fit into those jeans you bought 5 years ago, you've definitely still got it. Brute, still got it.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Get your cook on with Asda, with Uncle Ben's rice 250 grams for just £1, and our Butcher's Selection chicken breast fillets only £3.40 for 650 grams. Why not whack it in the wok? At Asda, we're committed to low prices every day on the quality products you need. Asda. Selected stores and lines subject to availability.
A squirt for you, a squeeze for me, a splodge for the kids, and that makes 3. A splat coming in, a splot going out. A safe pair of hands is what it's about. A squirt for you. When you're out and about, keep Carex antibacterial hand sanitizer on hand. With 70% alcohol to kill viruses and 99.99% of bacteria, every squirt means you're in safe hands. Helping to keep you safe and protected. That's why we Carex. Always read the label and use sanitizer safely. Find out more at carex.co.uk.
Looking to freshen up your listening on TuneIn? Head to the homepage to discover something new. There you'll see custom recommendations based on your listening habits, along with new episodes of shows you've enjoyed in the past. Uncover your next audio obsession on the homepage.
Are you ready for the realest first-hand take of what's happening in the NBA? On their podcast, All the Smoke, Former NBA players Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson bring their fiery intensity to the mic, dishing on the latest news and drama from on and off the court without boundaries.
Half man, half amazing. My friend, our brother, Vince Carter, man. Welcome to the show.
Yo, what's up, man? What's up, my brother? Man, I'm good.
Search All the Smoke on TuneIn to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. The best sports story all day, 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. ESPN Daily.
Search ESPN Daily to listen.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
He does! Fabry wins it!
To standout stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
It's headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Good morning. From Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York City, I'm Anne-Marie Horderm with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. It's risk-off Monday morning, at least when you're looking at European equities. The stock 600 is down 0.4%. We're lower with healthcare stocks, personal goods, and technology dragging the benchmark lower. But U.S. equity futures at the moment are in the green. We have seen some fluctuation overnight, but S&P 500 mini futures up 0.2%. We've seen a huge rally in stocks around the world. Been a hot few weeks. Investors now looking for what is the next catalyst. This week, the focus will be on Fed policy. A lot of questions regarding potentially yield curve control. Is that a next tool for the Fed to bring out? U.S. 10-year yield this morning is up 2.2 basis points, spot 92% on the 10-year. The dollar this morning down 0.3%. The Bloomberg Dollar Index headed towards the longest losing streak since 2011. And Brent crude this morning, $42.75, up 1%. This comes at that historic deal between OPEC Plus was extended over the weekend. This morning, we will get a joint press conference from Russia and Saudi oil ministers. That's a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Leanne.
Good morning, Anne-Marie, and thank you. The UK is finalising plans to ease its lockdown. That's as public support for Prime Minister Boris Johnson's response to the outbreak is dropping. 3 polls this weekend showed the gap narrowing between the Conservatives and Labour. Tomorrow, the Prime Minister plans to brief cabinet ministers on the next stage of easing restrictions. Now, President Donald Trump is pulling around 9,500 troops out of Germany, and in another sign of disconnect between Washington and Berlin, Chancellor Angela Merkel was caught off guard. It cuts American forces in Germany by around a quarter. The president has criticized the Merkel government for not meeting its defense spending targets. And in one of the world's biggest diamond vaults, hidden inside an office on the dusty outskirts of Botswana's capital, Gaborone, the precious stones just keep piling up. Owner De Beers, which mines and auctions most of its gems in the southern African nation, has barely sold any rough diamonds since February. Neither has Russian rival Alrosa. The coronavirus pandemic has devastated the diamond world as jewelry stores around the world shut. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerens. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Leanne, I know it's an issue that's near and dear to your heart. Not just because you love diamonds, right?
Yeah.
But because you grew up in the mines.
I did. I grew up on the mines in Botswana, so I know a lot about rough diamonds. I met many of them and saw many of them.
Many of them.
But it's quite an interesting story, because obviously what's happening to all these beautiful stones as so much of the world shuts down? But what's also interesting is, too, as my cousins have got engaged in lockdown, both with diamonds, so people are buying them.
Yeah, well, is there any other way to get engaged? There's no other stone that you use, is there?
Oh, well, that would be the De Beers motto, I'm sure.
Exactly. I guess
sometimes it's your birthstone, isn't it? But I'm not 100% sure, as I've never been engaged, but you can tell me.
All right. Well, let's go over to Nathan Hager. And
good morning.
I don't want to get too personal here, but are you engaged, Nathan?
I've been married for almost 18 years, man.
So you know a little bit about this.
Yeah, and interestingly, my wife wanted some color in the engagement ring, so we actually went with tanzanite.
Cool.
Yeah, something different. It was kind of the thing around the turn of the century. Different things.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. What have you got on in terms of diamonds? Well, diamonds in the rough on your program.
We could see soon whether actual physical weddings could be starting once again. The big news after all the couple of weeks of protest we've seen in this country. New York City, the city hardest hit by the coronavirus pandemic, is moving into phase 1. The reopening into whatever the new normal is going to look like begins this morning. We're going to have details on just exactly what that means, particularly after all the unrest and damage to the world's financial center. Bloomberg's Max Abelson is going to be with us for those details this morning. As for markets, some question about how far the rally goes after the huge surprise that was the May jobs report. We'll put that question to Lori Calvasina of RBC Capital and Dynamic Economic Strategies founder John Sylvia. They're both with us this morning as well. Plus, two of the biggest players in the race for a COVID-19 cure are talking merger. Join me and Karen Moscow for that and much more coming up this morning on Bloomberg Daybreak. Matt?
Looking very much forward to it. Nathan Hager coming up with Karen Moscow if you're listening on Sirius XM, channel 119. If you're tuned in on London DAB digital radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Yeah, so New York opening up. Very interesting. Right, let's talk about what's going on here in Europe. So ECB President Christine Lagarde is today going to be questioned by lawmakers. It comes only a few days after the ECB boosted its stimulus program, so no doubt she'll face more questions to explain her thinking. It helped to boost the US stock 600, as we've been talking about this morning, to a third week of great gains. Traders taking heart that economies are reopening, that monetary and fiscal stimulus is moving in lockstep. Well, joining us this morning is Eric Nielsen, who is Group Chief Economist at UniCredit. Eric, very good to speak to you this morning. You have argued that the Eurozone's policies are creating trust in Europe. What did you think then of Germany's industrial production figures this morning? Where do you think we are in terms of the recovery in Europe?
Yeah, good morning. I think there's no doubt we saw last week the market reaction to both the German fiscal package for the recovery and the ECB, a big sign of confidence also in the euro and in the record bid for the Italian 10-year. So I think it's a bond. So this is all very good news. And then we got the industrial production number today, as you said, in Germany, but April. But it's broadly as we expected, really. You can correlate these things quite clearly with the lockdown severity, and on those numbers, and also on the numbers that has come out of Germany on the trucking index, so the index of how much trucks run around the autobahns, you have for May already numbers there of a strong rebound. So my guess is that we have this industrial production number coming down April that we got this morning, and then we get the bounce for May.
Where do you think we're going to see the biggest bounces? Which economies will recover the best?
In Europe, I think it's Germany. First of all, Germany was the least of the major countries, the least hit, but it's also by far the country that's been most aggressive in terms of policy response. So I think that's the first one that will come, but partly because they hit down, you can also sort of the depth of the crisis, in a sense, is probably a little bit less severe than a place like Italy and Spain. So sort of statistically and mathematically, they will also get very nice bounces once they open up.
Yeah, okay. Well, we're also looking, of course, to Jay Powell, who will give his press conference on Wednesday after the US jobs report on Friday. What do you make of the state of the US recovery? Are you as optimistic perhaps as the markets are? We see a much weaker dollar, and obviously much stronger equities because of hope that the US is reopening, rebounding quickly.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a difficult one, right? I'm a little bit less optimistic there than the market in general, so that's my bottom line. The labor market data, of course, were very good, although there were these confusions about the unemployment numbers that the Bureau of Labor Statistics themselves said worth about 3 percentage points. And then you have this issue of in America, the people are furloughed go into unemployment, so once you sort of call them back, you say this big drop in unemployment, where in Europe, when you're furloughed, you're not called unemployed. So there's a lot of noise in the statistics right now. My big question mark is that as the U.S. look like they're opening up again or easing on the lockdown measures, while their R numbers are still quite high, and the pandemic is still roaring along. I think we end up with the question: if America is right on that, and sort of the numbers come down, infections come down, the death rates come down in America anyway, then I think we have to conclude one day that Europe was too cautious. On the other hand, if history sort of shows that this thing that you should keep your distances until the R naught comes under 1, then the risk is that the U.S. gets a second big wave and a bit of a tragedy, right? So it's too early to tell.
Where do you think we're going to see the biggest problems from the aftermath of this? With so many trillions in stimulus and especially central bank spending, are we going to have inflation?
No, I can't see it, Matt, because, in a nutshell, right, inflation happens when the output gap closes, right, and then goes positive in a sense that there's more demand than for goods and services than there's availability of goods and services.
Well, when you just print money to pay your debts, right?
Say again?
Or when you just print money wantonly to pay your debts.
Yeah, the central bank can do this, and you are seeing obviously the fiscal stimulus, which is a type of with the central banks, the MMT, if you will. But my point is this: if you fear inflation the next, say, 5 years, you have to tell me that the stimulus is so strong that it boosts demand faster than what's available in potential supply. And granted, supply or capacity has probably come down a little bit because of the destruction of some businesses here during the crisis. But I get you, Eric.
I got to wrap you up there. I totally understand what you're saying, and you'll say more of it on surveillance up next if you're listening on DAB.
Picture this. Small businesses on eBay are working to
get things moving.
Sending spices to novice cooks.
Hairbands to kids.
Desks for home offices.
Delivering the goods.
Shipping footballs.
Fruit trees.
And dishwashers.
Thousands of small businesses on eBay are helping to keep the nation going. They are individually brilliant, stronger as one. Buy, sell, eBay.
This is a message from the government about the emergency measures to support the economy during the period of disruption caused by the coronavirus. To help you, your business, and your workers affected, you can apply for cash grants, business rate holidays, statutory sick pay relief packages, as well as the coronavirus job retention and self-employment income support schemes. For information, go to gov.uk/business-support now.
With the NHL season temporarily on ice, now is a good time to catch up on past games.
Bergeron, he scores!
With game replay on TuneIn, you can listen to every power play, slap shot, and goal of the 2019-2020 season so far.
Suter to Cunnin to Fiala, he scores!
And for a limited time, it's free for hockey fans everywhere. Search classic game replays to start listening.
Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, June 8th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
A weekend of peaceful protests goes global as cities across the country end curfews.
New York City enters phase one with as many as 400,000 people returning to work.
And talks get started on what could be the biggest deal ever in the pharmaceutical industry.
New York's mayor announces police reforms as New York's governor has advice for protesters' health. I'm Amy Morris. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. What do the Knicks do when other NBA teams are playing? In a presidential tweet aimed at NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow.
And I'm Nathan Hager. Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by BNY Mellon's Pershing. Learn why the world's most sophisticated advisory firms and broker-dealers rely on Pershing to help them improve profitability, create efficiency, attract talent, and manage risk at Pershing.com.
And U.S. futures are gaining to start the week. It is 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up about 17 points. Dow futures up 183. NASDAQ futures up 24. The DAX in Germany's down 0.3%. CAC in Paris down 0.1%. And the FTSE 100 is up 0.25%. Nikkei 225 in Japan gained 1.4%. And the Hang Seng in Hong Kong was little changed. 10-year Treasury down 7/30 seconds, yield 0.92%. Yield on the 2-year 0.21%. COMEX gold is up 0.9% or $14.50 at $16.9750 an ounce. The euro 1.13 against the dollar. The yen 109.49. Nathan.
Karen, it was a weekend of peaceful protests with rallies across the country from New York to Los Angeles, drawing little to no violence. Demonstrators lined the streets in New York with peaceful gatherings leading Mayor Bill de Blasio to end the city's curfew a day early.
And honestly, I hope it's the last time we will ever need a curfew in New York City.
And streets were packed in our nation's capital. Protesters marched peacefully in Washington. Mitt Romney was among them, making him the first known Republican senator to join their ranks. After several days with no violence, President Trump ordered the National Guard to leave D.C. That was the sound of demonstrations in London as rallies went global. The weekend saw protests sweep into France, Spain, Hong Kong, and several other countries. Overall, the weekend saw relatively few arrests, while Chicago joined New York in ending its curfew.
Now New York's mayor turns his attention to another major moment.
The beginning of phase one, the restart of this city, the restart of our economy, the restart of people's livelihoods.
Starting today, some non-essential retailers can open their doors. Others will be limited to delivery and curbside pickup. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo.
You watch the gauges. And if the gauges are staying down low, then you can open the valve more.
Restaurant dining remains closed for now. That will ease in phase two with outdoor seating at most establishments.
As the city reopens, many shops are facing uncertainty over exactly what business will look like. We get more from Bloomberg's John Tucker in New York.
Well, Nathan and Karen, one thing that's certain is uncertainty. The question is, will people shop? Frank Vellucci operates fast casual restaurant Sweet Catch Poke, which has already been doing curbside pickup.
Our business is predicated on office building workers. All our locations are right near large office buildings in Manhattan.
Ashwin Deshmukh is still waiting on rules for opening his cocktail bar, Short Stories.
It might be just impossible for small bars and restaurants like ours to survive.
Many retailers in New York City are also still reeling from looting and vandalism. Boarded up shops in the city show many aren't even attempting to open today. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. As many as 400,000 New Yorkers could board buses and subways to head back to work today. That is mass transit increasing its schedule by reversing cuts made at the start of the pandemic. We spoke with New York Lieutenant Governor Kathy Hochul about cautionary measures being put into place.
There are subways, they have been stay
sanitized top to bottom by individuals that have just been working fully through the night. So we're going to continue those processes. We're going to add more trains. We know that there'll be increased capacity, but people are going to be anxious.
And to help ease that anxiety, there'll be social distancing markers on subway platforms and hand sanitizing stations throughout the system. While the city starts Phase 1, New York's mid-Hudson Valley region enters Phase 2 tomorrow. Long Island starts its second phase Wednesday.
Massachusetts enters Phase 2 today, allowing a large range of businesses in the state to open their doors. Here with details is Bloomberg's Denise Pellegrini.
Outdoor restaurant service, in-store retail shopping, and sleeping in hotels are among the things allowed again in Massachusetts as of today, and summer camps and child care centers can also open. Governor Charlie Baker is calling today's Phase 2 reopening the cautious phase, with many rules on social distancing still in place.
In a world where COVID-19 exists, everything looks a little different.
The governor says the next step is Phase 3, the vigilance stage, followed by Phase 4, the new normal. Denise Pellegrini, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Denise, thank you. And turning to corporate news now, two of the biggest drug companies in the fight against COVID-19 could be looking to team up permanently. Bloomberg News has learned that AstraZeneca has made a preliminary takeover approach to Gilead Sciences. Here with more on the possible tie-up is Bloomberg's Aaron Kirchfield in London.
In this industry, it really is eat or be eaten. And so the rationale would be it's all about R&D pipeline and investments. It costs a lot of money to develop drugs and get them on the market. Gilead has a good track record in terms of HIV treatment and other pipeline drugs. So if you were thinking beyond COVID and strengthening yourself, this might be a transformational deal that brings you to the front of the big guys and gives you a very strong pipeline and R&D budget.
AstraZeneca's approach is only a preliminary one. A combination with Gilead would be the biggest deal ever in the pharmaceutical industry. Right now, shares of AstraZeneca are down 2% in London. Gilead is up 3% in early trading.
And oil is gaining this morning after OPEC and its allies agreed to extend output cuts. A one-month extension promises stricter compliance to ensure members don't pump more than pledged. At the same time, Saudi Arabia is making some of the biggest price increases in 2 decades, and that has Brent crude up 1% or 40 cents at $42.71 a barrel. West Texas crude is just shy of $40 a barrel at $39.84. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg. That brings us to 5:07 on Wall Street. Now let's check in with Amy Morris to find out what else is going on around the world. Good morning, Amy.
All right, good morning, Nathan. New York Mayor Bill de Blasio is announcing new police reforms, including shifting NYPD funding. He says the city must address the issue of office accountability and that several officers were suspended in connection with incidents during protests last week.
There are more investigations underway, both within the NYPD and then the independent review being done.
Prosecutors say 2 Buffalo police officers have been charged with assault after a video showed them shoving a 75-year-old protester. The man falls backwards, cracks his head on the concrete, and the police walk past as the blood pools around his head. Now, both officers pleaded not guilty to second-degree assault. They have been suspended without pay. The governor praised prosecutors for moving quickly to charge the officers. A majority of the members of the Minneapolis City Council say they support disbanding that city's police department. Councilman Stephen Fletcher.
It's not that we're dismantling a system that was working. We're dismantling a system that actually wasn't working very well for us and seeing if we can design something better. And I believe we can.
It is an aggressive stance that comes just as the state has launched a civil rights investigation after George Floyd's death. They've already banned the use of chokeholds and neck restraints. And we're watching Congress for a broad police reform bill to be released later today as lawmakers look to turn the energy of the nationwide Black Lives Matter protests into concrete legal challenges that could make it easier to prosecute police misconduct. A draft version of the Justice in Policing Act curtails qualified immunity for police and would allow for more civil lawsuits. This as New York Governor Andrew Cuomo once again expressed his concerns that the massive crowds will lead to new spread of the coronavirus. He has some advice for protesters.
My opinion, not a fact, I would act as if you were exposed, and I would tell people who I'm interacting with, assume I am positive for the virus, because you could be infecting other people.
Outdoor graduation ceremonies with up to 150 people will be allowed in New York as more restrictions are lifted. High schools can start planning socially distanced graduation starting June 26th. Global news 24 hours a day on air on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in 120 countries. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Okay, Amy, thanks. It's 5:09 on Wall Street. Now time for the Bloomberg Sports Update. Good morning, John Stashar.
Good morning, Nathan. The issue of NFL players kneeling during the national anthem had pretty much gone away, but then George Floyd, the protests, the Drew Brees controversy last week, and Adrian Peterson just said he absolutely intends to kneel this season. That has made President Trump wonder if all players are going to kneel and whether they will have the blessing of NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, who said this the other day. Okay, Roger Goodell had made the comments last week of supporting Black Lives Matter, and that the president tweeted late last night, is it possible Goodell is intimating it would now be okay for players to kneel disrespecting our flag and our country. 22 NBA Orlando next month start resuming the season, so what do the Knicks and 7 other teams do? The thought was players from those teams could be assured of safe from the virus, but teams want their players to go 9 months without playing a game. There's now talk of joint practices, summer camps. And fall exhibition games. The Nets will resume their season. Those last regular season games will determine if they get into the playoffs. The Nets will battle Orlando and Washington for 2 spots. The odds on the Nets winning the NBA championship went from 750 to 1 down to 60 to 1 amid speculation Kevin Durant might return from his leg injury. But Durant just made it clear he's not going to play. He'll wait until next season. John Stash Hour, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
Our weekly look at what would have been if the sports world wasn't shut down due to the coronavirus. For the first time in 7 decades, there is no college baseball in Omaha this summer. The College World Series was scheduled to begin there this week. London was calling for Major League Baseball. The Cubs and Cardinals were set to travel about 4,000 miles to play in Europe, and we'd be in the thick of the NBA and NHL finals. Futures moving higher this morning. S&P futures up almost 18 points. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Jenny Liss, Jewish communal leader and philanthropist, talks about why she chose the Jewish Communal Fund for her family's charitable giving.
For a lot of people, it would be the convenience factor. I don't have to track anything.
If charitable giving is an important part of your life, JCF can help you organize your philanthropy with our donor-advised fund. A fund can be established with a minimum tax-deductible contribution of $5,000. Make grants to your favorite charities, and JCF handles all the administration and reporting.
At the year end, our board awards community grants from fees and endowment income to UJ's annual campaign. We also make gifts to specific organizations, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, the hungry. The fact that we come together as a community at the end of the year to build community, that's what makes us different.
Get better at giving back. To find out more about JCF's impact, visit jcfny.org and download the Giving Report. JCF, we have a gift for giving.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by